Welcome, everyone. My name is Frank Summerjay. I am the chapter president, and I welcome you to the January 2021, our first of 2021 IC2 Seattle General Session. I'll let people kind of come in and start setting up. We're still waiting for a presenter. So while we wait, I wanted to take the opportunity to, first of all, thank everybody that's participating. We have a handful of the board members that have graced us already. Hopefully we see everybody's name on the list. That includes our Jake, communications director, Trey. Let's see, I don't see Trey, I don't see Jake yet. I'm sure they'll join real soon. Mark, I see, has joined. Stephen has joined. We're still waiting for Joe. Stephen, I noticed that I haven't added you yet to my intro slide. So, Mr. Belleville, I need a picture and need to make sure I add you to this slide.
He needs to go to Glamour Shots and get his picture done.
I know. It's kind of missing, isn't it? So, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Our first of this year. Just pulling up Zoom, all the windows, just making sure that I have everything set up here. While we wait for Jean to join us, interestingly enough, I had a request come to me recently, or somebody indicated that they had an opportunity to read my my 2021 blog, my prediction blog. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, you can probably find me on, the web. I had the opportunity for the past 3 years to be publishing my tech predictions that I think are coming up over the course of the year. I wouldn't say that I am an expert predictor, but you know what? It's kind of fun to kind of do this effort. And as I mentioned, is since Jean hasn't joined us yet, and by the way, Jean, the minute you join us, let me know. I will hand it off to you. Could you put the link in the chat? And I will gladly put the link in the chat if I could actually find it. I love how difficult sometimes things can be at the wrong time. This is like typical life, right? Let's pull this up. We'll pull the post up. All right, here we go. So, hey, thanks a lot. So I've over the past several years, I've made several predictions as to what I think is coming out. And while we wait, I thought what I could do is share my thoughts and some of the thinking that I've had behind this. So let me change the share to this screen. Let's see if that works. No, that did not work. It's funny, I work in the tech industry and I still find myself flummoxed half the time by the technology that we're dealing with. Can anybody let me know if you can see my screen sharing correctly?
Yep.
Anybody?
Yeah, we see it, Frank.
The browser?
Yep.
Awesome. So what are some of my predictions? One is, interestingly enough, I got into drones this past year quite deeply, and I don't know how many of you have gone out to purchase a device recently, but one of the interesting things is we're actually now starting to see some amazing technology evolution when it comes to drone technology. I thought the news article associated with first time a fire was put out by drones is an indicator, I believe, that we're going to start seeing this technology actually be a game changer in the market. They're not going to be just these toys anymore. They're actually tools. The industry is actually adopting this pretty aggressively, and I think, let's see, oh, there we go. I think we're going to actually see that this technology is going to make a difference. Now, one of the side things associated with it that I wanted to share, which was this really amazing thing, is that drones, as they are becoming more emblematic of the technology that we're adopting, they're also becoming much more handheld. You know, I thought the whole concept of these selfie drones, I believe there's a small company out of, where is it? So if I actually click on my own link, this AirPix, man, let me tell you, literally something you can put in your pocket. Think holding your arm out to take a selfie pic is of, I think, days of yesterday. I mean, everything we're going to see is going to be moving towards this direction. So, man, now unfortunately I lost my blog here. There we go. So moving back though, you know, interestingly enough, I skipped over my #1 prediction, and this is an area that Microsoft, being an employee of Microsoft, I'm very intimate with the activities on SolarWinds, and I'd be interested in knowing if anybody's willing to share their thoughts about this. But I can tell you, our perspective on SolarWinds is that it is a remarkable monitoring tool, and this attack was remarkably well orchestrated. So for all of you, or any of you that had to deal with this, you know, my spirit goes out to you, because this is a complicated attack. But at the same time, the reality is that attacks like this, especially supply chain based attacks and going for third-party products, I believe in 2021 we're going to see a lot more of it. Products like Windows, products like Android, as they become hardened, as they become more secure, the reality is that they will become harder and harder to attack. However, by the way, just so you know, I'm reading my chat just here because I wanted to just share with you, is that I see that Gene is getting an update. So talking about third-party products like Zoom, could you imagine that update that Gene is actually literally getting right now is actually a compromised image that she's pulling down? The reality is that the operating systems and browser environments are now more secure than they've been ever. But now that has totally exposed the fact that third-party products, and especially if it's a management product, what is the risk that you're actually introducing inside your organization? So the fact is that we are going to see, I believe, in 2021, a wave of products that are going to be exploited, and there are definitely going to be solutions that okay, so I'm overriding. You are overriding my audio. Gene, I am happy to hand this off to you, but I'm not too sure what to tell you right now. Since our presenter is trying to get on board, I will see what we can do about handing things off to her. Is there anything I can do to help you get online, Gene? Nope. All right. I will continue, I guess. I can, you know, Gene, what I can do is I can give you control of this presentation, but once I do, I won't be able to take it back. At least I don't know how to take it back once I give you control. Beauty of Zoom. All right. Since I'm waiting for her, and anybody else, I think. So, anybody a Zoom expert here?
Frank, do you know her number? Can you talk to her?
You know what? Interestingly enough, all I see her is on the chat. I mean, I think I can give her. I noticed that now they've done this remote control, but I don't see any other capability besides, as I said, putting her into into lead mode. And if I do that, then if she's got problems, that means that the whole session will be affected by that.
It's kind of ironic that a Microsoft guy is not having us do this on Teams, by the way.
Well, so let's be clear. I did start this on Teams. and we had all kinds of problems. And in fact, actually, I will share with this audience, as due to licensing restrictions, I ended up utilizing Zoom. Microsoft, you should learn something about cheap, effective software sometimes does help having a very simple licensing model. So yes, very familiar with that. So Jean, I guess I will continue until you can jump in. I don't know what else to do. Do I see you on the list? I see you on the list. I can make you presenter.
Hey, Frank, yes. Try and make her presenter.
The only thing is, once I make you presenter, I lose. If I make you a host, I'm not a host anymore, I believe. So let me do that. I'll make you host, Jean.
Her, yeah.
That's what I said, didn't I?
Yep.
All right. Jean, you're the host now. I hope this works. Jean, did that work?
I can still hear Frank.
Yeah, that's because I'm still unmuted.
And oh, looks like Jean's sharing her screen.
Yeah, we can see the share. We can't hear you, Jean.
Can Jean maybe call in? Is there a number just to get her on the audio?
I believe, yeah, we can see your view, by the way, Jean, just so you know.
And once she starts hosting, Jay, she can give the host back to you. It's like a hot potato.
I think we all need to do Zoom training. I think that's.
Well, part of the problem is we're using Microsoft Teams, and that's a little different.
Yeah.
She can hear everything. She's trying to speak. Yeah, she can hear everything we're saying. We just cannot hear her audio.
Yeah, that seems like it. And especially since she's screen sharing, I mean, we can see her slides.
Hey, Frank, I don't know, and I don't want to be selfish about this, but this is the first time I've attended a visit. If there are any other newbies, can you tell us a little bit about the group while Jean's trying to figure out how to get audio?
Well, that's a great question, and I gladly share with anybody who's attending for the first time. You know, Zoom makes things or online presentations like this make things remarkably difficult, but I'm glad that all of you were able to share. So mid of last year, the ISC2, actually, what I would say is that several of us, myself and the folks that I showed earlier, we reached out to ISC2 and decided to start a local chapter. It seems like the value that ISC2, for I suspect many of you that are either familiar with the organization or familiar with the certification, is that ISC2 has local presences across the country. However, we didn't have any presence in the Seattle area. It doesn't help that the pandemic hit us and it really slowed down the process. Originally, for some of you, you might know that I started reaching out to you probably in, was it 2018, 2019, to consider starting up this chapter. The chapter represents the organization, the greater ISC2 organization. And the intent of the chapter is to really be able to drive the adoption of CISSPs in the Northwest. There's some key chartering goals that we wanted to accomplish, including the ability to increase the talent pool required for organization to be able to hire certified individuals. So if you are one of those certified individuals, welcome. If you're somebody that's looking to become certified, the intent is to help you become successful and be able to complete your certification. Certainly as an employee of Microsoft, we look for highly qualified, certified individuals that have credentials in the cyberspace. Being somebody that actually does work in the cyberspace, the value is, how do you represent an individual differently from just somebody who says, I'm a security guy, versus I'm a security guy and I can actually say that there's a level of credential recognition that makes you unique in the industry. And I believe that the ISC2 has historically provided that capability. What we as an organization have done is established ourselves as a chapter. So this has actually been a long journey. Past 8 months, we've been going through a certification process with the ISC2 to become a chapter in the Northwest here. So interestingly enough, as of January 5th, we have been considered an organization that has met all the criteria, and we expect within, I'm hoping, the next week or two to receive our final certification. As if you hit our website, which is aka.ms/ISC2, if you wanted to hit our website, that represents the fact that we're still a chartering chapter. The intent is that in the next several weeks, we will be a represented chapter. What does that what's the advantage as a member? Well, if you're a certified individual, that means that we'll be able to maintain your CPEs for you and help you preserve and accrue that. As a new as somebody moving into the space, into the cyberspace, will then be able to provide you a path to become certified. Everything that we present, including Jean's presentation that we're trying to set up right now, every component is aligned and designed to be something that works towards your certification process. So we will be working very closely to ensure that every time you attend one of our sessions, and hopefully in person. I personally am not a big fan of this remote learning type process. In the future, I'd prefer to think that we will be able to do this face-to-face, and also provide training opportunities for individuals to become certified as CISSPs or additional CIS type certifications. Jean, I see your slides. I still can't hear you, unfortunately. You know, there's only one person on our board that's actually more difficult to get onto the conversation, and that's Joe. Because Joe always wants to tunnel his traffic through like a million different paths because he doesn't trust the internet.
10,000, not a million.
Yeah.
10,000.
Yes. And I swear he's about the only person that's actually harder to set up a call with. So I'm glad to say that, Joe, right now, you're not at the epitome of not being on the call.
So somebody else was good to post in the chat for Jean the numbers that she could use. So if she doesn't leave the screen, rather keeps the screen the way that it is, and she uses her phone to dial into one of these numbers, she can do that too. And then she'll get audio. She just need to mute her computer.
Hopefully she's trying to give that a shot. Silence on one of these calls is, I know, sometimes the most frustrating, so I'll keep the conversation going. And we're still waiting.
Frank, maybe I can ask another question. So I would assume that the majority, if not everybody other than me, are technicians, specialists in IT. I got referred to this group by somebody with a background like that. Can you, but maybe that's different. Can you, maybe my understanding's different. What are you hoping the makeup of this group to be?
Great question. And you know, ultimately what this association with this local chapter is going to represent is there's a couple of different elements to that. One is there is a core principle associated with having just general collection of smart people getting together and sharing knowledge. I think very much like the ISSA and the privacy groups within the Northwest, and also the CISA groups within the Northwest, we will continue sharing general knowledge. Where I think it's important, as I said, the two key areas of that makes us unique is our direct affiliation with the ISC2, providing a direct path to certification and providing a direct path to the association when it comes to exposure to the certification. And likewise is introduction to educational institutions, students, people moving into the space as coming out of college. You know, interestingly enough, I had the opportunity to present to several CS groups. And one of the things that always was remarkable to me are these computer science graduates that have virtually no understanding of what information security is about, or cybersecurity. So the hope is that an association like this, especially with its certification, and I know students most of the time think about the fact that they want to be able to walk away with a degree, a master's, or whatever it happens to be, an undergrad or a graduate type outcome. Associated with that, the intent would be is that this chapter is going to help local institutions be able to achieve cybersecurity awareness and certification as well. So certainly the call to every member to help us in that charter will be standing, and we're going to be looking to everybody to help in that process. Now, of course, I'll keep throwing out the COVID factor. It makes it very difficult, virtually impossible, to be very successful in that area. However, down the line, I suspect you know, life will go back to normal. We won't have to deal with riots anymore, and we'll be able to actually deal with helping pretty much everybody in society that's moving into computer science to have a better, clear understanding on cybersecurity. So, Jean, I still don't think you're able to get audio, but we do see your slide. It looks very cool. I have this long, arduous spiel about, you know, Jean's background and her experience in this association and within the ISC2 organization. And, you know, interestingly enough, I would say that until she can at least say something, I'm kind of hesitant to get too deep, because, you know, she's going to be blushing too much over there. So we're hitting the 27-minute mark. Jean, should we start considering seeing what alternatives we have? Because I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know if you can type. So
Could I make a suggestion for Jean? If she can't seem to hook into the audio, could she call someone and route it through your phone? It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing.
That's a great recommendation. Anything that will help. All right. So temporarily then, I guess, Jean, can you throw the control back to me? And what we can do is have a quick conversation about SolarWinds. Maybe. But since I gave Jean control, I can't actually get control back. Unless I can. No, I can't. All right. I don't know what to say at this point. It doesn't look like Jean is able to give me control back. I will have to say that I apologize, everyone. What we'll try to do is maybe,
All right.
yes.
Jean's number, her phone number is the 1-650 815-6298. That's dialed in.
Yeah, I see it.
But she's
But I don't have
still not
control.
able to unmute.
I wonder if I could reclaim host. Hey, that's a new button.
Yes.
Ask to unmute. That's the only thing I can do for her is I can ask to unmute. I can mute all, but I can't unmute her, unfortunately. I see her number.
Let's see. If she leaves the meeting,
All right.
then you should, yeah.
I have control again, but if nothing else.
Right.
So for those of you that are hanging out, only 19 of you. So what I'll do is if Jean figures out what's going on, I will send it back to her. So what I think, I thought it'd be worthwhile to kind of dig in a little bit on SolarWinds. This is actually a conversation, and I believe that there's a couple of you on this call that have probably some deep knowledge on this too. Interestingly enough, the perspective on SolarWinds, and interesting, we were gonna do a presentation, a proper full hour presentation on this particular problem. What I think is very interesting about this is that if you're not familiar about it, this is a supply chain attack. Interestingly enough, work in data center cybersecurity, so I deal with this problem very, very closely. Now, I can't disclose too much information as to how and what's going on within Microsoft, except for the fact that we as an organization was not affected. The truth is that we were not affected just because of the way we deployed this Winds installation. However, many organizations that did deploy it, what they faced is a lot of problems associated with the fact that the installation of that particular instance had access to a lot of critical environments. Now, it's not just the critical environments that's affected. It's also the fact that the identities that were being utilized was the same identity that most of the corporations utilize. So let me ask for everybody that's here is, do you look at your identity, your privileged identity, as a separate identity, or is it the same identity as that is utilized by your users? Case in point, if your organization is the, we tend to point to contoso.com. So let's say you're contoso.com and you're Frank at contoso.com. Is that the same admin user that's utilizing that capability for a critical environment such as SolarWinds? So it's the same administrator account that installed this instance as it is the one that's checking your mail. Identity isolation is actually something that's been discussed within our organization for a little while, and it's actually something that is very effective. I had a presentation set aside for next month to talk about identity isolation. It's an area that I've been working now for about 2.5 years, associated with privileged access workstations, which the principle behind it is, how do you isolate a third-party application, especially these critical roles, and make something like this, where you have this breach not become something that can proliferate through your organization. In this particular scenario, the proliferation of this networking system had to do with the same credentials being utilized when you utilize the same certificate that installs that application that has now full access corporate environment. I'll open this up and ask the audience, how many of you, and I'm not going to say specifically how many of you are using SolarWinds, more particularly is how many of you have a practice about identity isolation? this is very particular to, do you utilize a different identity to manage your environment, manage your critical, and not critical software, but critical services differently than what you do for accessing your corporate email, for instance? Anybody have any insight as to, are you utilizing the same ecosystem?
Frank, I can speak to some of the challenges I've had over the years implementing policies like that. You know, I think really my most recent example of that was at Mod Pizza when I arrived, and everybody had an admin account, and you know, they basically were a local admin, and educating the team to, you know, the downfall of that, and you know, was able to create a policy around that, and then implement it and roll it out. So the even the administrators were using their generic, you know, a generic account. So you know, that's kind of the example that I've had, and I'm sure other people have seen that kind of out in the field as well.
Well, and that's actually a great direction that you took, Mark, and I think that's one of the things that's really important to think about. I'm going to again kind of point back to how third-party applications within your organization, especially when you utilize them to manage your network. So think about the Cisco equipment that you have deployed, or think about any of the networking gear that you have set up that has management software that can fundamentally change the course of how you're set up, let alone thinking of your cloud applications. So think of all of those AWS installations, or Microsoft Azure installations, or even Google environment. When you log into that environment, even with multi-factor authentication, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can assure that you have a clean keyboard. These days, the types of attacks that are going on, the reality is the attacks can come down directly to that device. It's one thing about that third-party application that you're installing. So, you know, again, I kind of point to this whole concept of secure workstations. What's the principle behind it? It's about isolating your environment, providing isolation through identity, providing isolation, basically creating a zero trust environment. Several years ago, when within our organization, we started realizing that we have to assume breach. At the end of the day, there's no way to say that you don't know if you don't have an insider that's already been breached. And it's one thing to think software is breached. It's another thing when people are breached. You know, I'll put things in perspective of a breach can be as simple as a physical attack on a site. You break windows. I mean, that is a form of a breach. You know, interestingly enough, what happens when somebody is put under duress? Would they divulge their password? The reality is, in most of those circumstances, I know myself, if somebody asked me under duress to give away my password to my corporate device, I'd give it. I'd have no hesitation whatsoever. I wouldn't put my life in front of something like that, not for my corporation anyway. So the reality is that most individuals would probably do that. So what does device isolation and identity isolation provide? It's one thing for me to give away my corporate credentials. It's another thing for an individual to actually be familiar enough to know that even if I gave them access to my email, that wouldn't give them access to my corporate access to cloud services, for instance. All of the Azure capabilities within my ecosystem wouldn't be exploited as a result of that. So when we think about isolation, and you know, when we think about the supply chain attack here, again, it was a perfect example where a very particular set of bad actors figured out what it took to be able to take over some certificates. Utilizing those certificates, were able to compromise a lot of hosts. Now, the organizations that had these hosts shared on their corporate network, and also be able to then basically walk that network. So think of Mimikat being able to, once you're on a host, being able to discover all the keys, all the passwords, all the users, and then being able to, of course, because we never share passwords and we never reuse passwords, right? Because that's our corporate practice, is don't reuse passwords. The reality is everybody reuses passwords. I would be shocked if they didn't. Even with multi-factor authentication, there's a lot of very clever techniques now built in to redirect, bypass, or overcome multi-factor authentication.
Yes, Frank, I read all your passwords.
Yes, that Joe, and that's the reason that you use so many hops before you connect to anything, right?
That's right.
So the reality is getting access to an environment and knowing a password these days isn't, or protecting your password isn't as sophisticated or as good as it used to be. Now these days, the ability to create more complex ways for attackers to have to discover your network is essential. Joe, do you have some insight on that? I mean, I know you and I have worked quite a bit on some of this technology, and I particularly talking about privileged access devices, but again, I know you've had experience with this too as well.
I did global intrusion detection for the enterprise. So I did passive tap of all of the circuits, all the Ethernets. So anything in the clear was readable.
And passwords are never in the clear, right?
There's man in the middle. There are techniques that can tradecraft techniques, and actually that's goes back to the SolarWinds tech. They have access to SolarWinds password manager, right? SolarWinds has all the credentials for all of the gear, all the servers, so it can manage it, right?
Exactly. And then that's the problem is again, once you have
credential harvesting. Yes, they harvested all the credentials of all of the SolarWinds Orion implementations that were critical or that were vital to that campaign. They had potentially. I don't have.
So now the reality is how long does a company like this survive, right? Especially after a massive exploit like this. Interestingly enough, you compare this attack to a company like Experian that when shortly after the exploit, their stock actually went up. So interestingly
it drooped for 2 weeks and then it went back up.
Equifax.
So
there you go. There's Gene.
Gene?
Yeah. Yes, I'm back. I finally got in. I finally found a phone that would work right. A headphone that would work right.
Technology, man. It's like, let me tell you, these days, it's not like you can walk into a room and say, here I am. Now you have to have your laptop work correctly. You have to have all the updates loaded correctly. You have to have Zoom work.
You got to have your YubiKey, or you got to be able to find your YubiKey.
I have
all right, Gene, did you want
5,000 different? Sure.
So as I hand this off to Gene, and I'll give you an opportunity to present on your fantastic topic that we've been waiting for several months now, actually, because we keep bumping you for one reason or another. A little bit of background.
It's pretty generic in some ways.
Well, no, that's not true. So Gene is.
I mean, it's something I want people to be aware of.
Jean is a legend in the industry. I mean, at the end of the day, she has more experience in this space and has helped develop the IC2 curriculum to an extent. So Jean, and she is also the vice president of the local chapter. I took up 43 minutes of your 1 hour, but we are in a position to run long. 19 people hung out.
Hey,
Okay.
Frank. She's also trained many ISC squared training classes. She's also taught many ISC squared training classes, probably taught Gene, more than 100 people?
Oh, many more than 100 people.
All right, so Gene,
over the years. I mean, I've done this both here and in Silicon Valley, where I lived for many, many years.
Gene, I've given you
Can you guys
access.
see my screen now?
No. Right now, we still see, I think, mine. I don't know. Anybody can speak up. I don't see anything yet.
I can see Frank's screen, yes.
Still
Here's
see
my
Frank's.
screen.
Frank brother. But I did give you, I did make you presenter.
Okay, so let's see what's going on here. Make it bigger again. I'm viewing Frank's screen, share screen. Yes. I think we'll go to here, share.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
That we
one thing
go
that's
back
hard-
to slideshow from the beginning.
All right, Gene,
All right.
it's all yours. Go for
Yeah.
it. I'll shut up.
Okay,
Oh, but
all
by
that
the way,
glitters is not gold. What? Sorry, I heard wait. Don't tell me.
we're still seeing your presenter's view, just so you know when you went to that. It's not the presentation.
You don't see my slides?
We're actually seeing your view. We're seeing yeah, just so you know.
You're
This is
seeing
like-
this, you're not seeing the slideshow?
Not the slideshow. You could try, yeah, see,
Are
we're
you
not seeing
seeing
the
this now?
slideshow. You can change the display settings, click display settings right up there. Oh, go back into the presentation. It's just the fact that we're seeing your view, that's all. We're seeing your presenter view.
This one. It should be seeing this one from the beginning. Are you seeing it now? Yes, no, maybe? What do you think?
Yeah, we're seeing
My
your
screen
presenter
or-
screen, Gene. We're seeing the next slide just like you do, which is not a bad thing.
Eh,
Just go
it's not a
with
great
it.
thing either. I
Go
mean,
with it, go with it.
okay. All righty. Well, okay. We'll make this bigger so you can see, and I can see. Get the screen. Come on.
Yeah, just go with presentation mode and we'll just follow along with you. There you go. Just leave it there. We're good.
Okay. So I've got, a little bit what I've been doing over the years. I was a developer for many, many years. And I wrote a lot of the early ATM networks and telephone switching systems, 911 systems, all kinds of other things. I moved to Seattle in the late 80s to work on the Exchange network, among other things, and a bunch of telephone stuff. Eventually, I made my way to Silicon Valley in the early 90s and started working on the web. I was our first webmaster, which got me interested back into security because I knew quite a bit about cryptography at that point. So we put together some stuff around PKI. We developed the first commercial PKI systems. We've done all kinds of weird stuff. Eventually, I ended up working at Visa. I was their head of their security. I was one of the founders of the Cloud Security Alliance. I was an ISSA Distinguished Fellow, woman of influence. Now I do executive consulting and CISO, and you wouldn't believe this because of the way it is today. But, helped co-found, as Frank said, the IC2 Square, IC Squared, Seattle chapter, as well as the Base Cybersecurity Institute. So, my whole point is I want everybody to be proactive about thinking about security because people stop thinking and they give up their power to change the world. And the other thing that people tend to do is not remember their past. I've been in this business a long time. There's a lot to learn from our history. We don't have to keep repeating the same mistakes. And so one of the things I want to focus on is proactive security. Today, technology is always evolving. We've got such unprecedented speed and power and scale. I mean, just look at our phones. What's in our smartphone today is something that occupied a room full of machines 30, 40, 50 years ago. Right now, we've got so much technology going on that nobody can keep track of it. And it's just, something that we are not really creating even winners out of. So we're reflecting the values in our emerging technologies that is shaping our culture and societies. And, it's got good points and it's got really bad points. So there's that extraordinary convergence of technology occurring. And so we don't really understand sometimes the unintended consequences, many of which are avoidable and predictable. And so with a little bit of forethought, we could prevent a lot of these problems. We don't want to create technologies that causes bigger problems than exist today because we were just neglectful. And so I always use this cartoon because I like it. And, that's us. We're the kind of people who sing, we used to be called paranoid. Now we're security experts because we like to pay attention to some of this stuff. And I encourage us all to pay more attention to what's coming out. Because while you're busy, somebody else is out there is, trying to get a hold of stuff that you're doing. We all make mistakes. We all make omissions. We don't bake it in. And then we wonder why we get out into the field that we have so burnt out and there's so much chaos going on. And it's because we're not stepping back and taking bigger picture looks and doing preemptive and proactive security. So history has got a lot of things to teach us. And one of the things that's always said, and this is something George Santayana said about 50 years ago, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. So this is a thing we've seen every day of the week, I think, this week. So there is a set of laws called the law of unintended consequences. And basically, it ends up with a couple different results. Sometimes you get a positive benefit. You get lucky, right? Sometimes there are unexpected things that happen in addition to the desired effect of something happening. So you might say, well, passwords, for example, are something that for some reason somebody might want to put passwords on their system of some sort. But if you don't tell people what you want, you could end up with, 1, 2, 3, SolarWinds or SolarWinds 1, 2, 3 posted someplace in somebody's GitHub. And then you have some unintended effects. And then you get a perverse effect, which is contrary to something you invented when you made a solution worse because you didn't think somebody's going to use it that way. And being a developer for a long time, one thing I learned, I've been a manager and developer for many, many years, is a lot of people who have tended to only program or know one operating system or know one piece of their code don't understand how people really use it. And so one cure for that I've always found is to put those people on a week or two stint on a help desk, and they'll come back like, oh, that's what you mean. But one of the people who really had some thoughts about what could go wrong with unintended consequences was Tim Berners-Lee, who I think everybody knows is one of the inventors of the W3C, the World Wide Web. And he knew that his inventions in the wrong hands could become a destroyer of worlds. So when it all started commercially in 1995, if you start looking, you can't see so you start looking at the first browsers here, IE, Mosaic, all of these things, you don't really see a whole lot of threats and things happening until in the late 90s, maybe. There's a few things that have come in there, but in this period is when the whole internet takes off. So you're just looking at things that become abuses of technology, and what has been good about the internet is now being overshadowed by a lot of the nightmarish things that are happening. That people are, things are reaching into your places of your business. Things are being used in ways you never intended it. There's misinformation going on all over the place. This is costing opportunities and taking away from some of the amazing things that can be done with the internet or other technologies. And we're wasting people's time and effort and turning people off from technology in lots of different ways. So when Tim Berners-Lee started looking at, well, how did we lose his way? You know, and he's written a bunch of articles about what he thinks about the internet right now. He thought it would be used for the good of humanity. And of course, then, you know, he had the World Wide Web. And one of his regrets, which I find quite funny, is he regrets not removing the double slash after HTTP. But by 2019, he was absolutely horrified by all the things that are going on in the internet, the scamming, the lack of privacy, all the hate speech, the discrimination and disinformation. And, you know, it's sort of a double-edged sword. So what were the implications? Well, right now we're in a situation where software, cloud, and networks and hardware are layered everywhere. We've got things stepping all over each other because everything's become so much more complex. So are we creating nightmares? You know, and how are we monitoring this? How are we observing this? Are we being fooled by technology and those who control it? Darn tootin'. Who really controls it? I don't know. Do you control it? I don't think any one person controls it, but, you know, we have the opportunity now to still make a difference. So I want to say, you know, where do we draw the line? And I'm going through this really fast because I've normally would expound upon this a bit more, but we do become hoisted on our own technology petard if we don't pay attention. I mean, I love this particular Gilbert. You know, customers are saying that we've sold their personal data and all the buyers were identity thieves. And, you know, when you hear boss says, well, that's just impossible. We've checked everybody's identity. And of course, yeah, look what happens. So another piece of technology I want to talk to is Bitcoins. Bitcoins, you know, the whole concept was that it would be secure, it would be anonymous, it would be something that people could use to send currency between themselves securely. But you know, really, what has happened? It's pseudo-anonymous. We still can figure out who you are. If you're doing ransomware, boy, that's your favorite way to get paid. We've got dark red markets all over the place. Monitoring, all kinds of scams. It's an electric power and hardware hog. And yes, I know there's a lot of companies now like PayPal and other companies, JP Morgan, are going out and buying Bitcoin. And I think it's up to $33,000 last time I looked. But it doesn't mean it's an ideal cryptocurrency. You know, the promise was it was to, you know, do all of these things, speculate, you know, subvert your oppressive government by, you know, moving your money around. But it really wasn't that. And so going forward, you got to be careful about cryptocurrencies. And I think the past few years have taught us that those scams, those things we've talked about, are real. I mean, what's the point of having an electronic cryptocurrency if somebody can steal it all out of your wallet? It's not backed by any government. Unless you have a secure token, it's not backed by the company. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area, and it's a lot of opportunity for theft and security. And I want people to pay attention to this stuff because it's going to come and bite you in the behind. You know, we start talking about privacy. We've given everybody who think around the world opportunities to do everything online. And there's absolutely trade-offs. I mean, a lot of places, everything is done on mobile phones. You don't have a laptop. You don't have really a tablet or anything. You're doing it on your phone. Well, you get that instant gratification of using that free software, that free account, and that short-term convenience of, you know, sending money to your buddies and by your phone, whatever. But you're blinded to the long-term consequences of privacy. So lots of times privacy means that they can coordinate your your cell phone location, your friends, your information, who you're talking to. Have you? They can coordinate it with the cameras, where they're monitoring people outdoors. Have you done something, walking to your company, whatever they're doing that somebody's interested in, they can now find out over the internet. So a lot of the edge technologies we're talking about that use 5G, Internet of Things, try to localize that information to, your particular home or company or wherever it is you have your edge set up, so that you have local control over it, but you really don't know who's actually got your ID. You don't know who's got your passwords, because we're making these systems so complicated, and we're not looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at little pieces. And so by reducing some of the information to localized information or cloud-based information, depending on how you look at these things, what kind of technology cost are you adding and as part of your security? Are you thinking about where and when and why are these things happening? We're bringing in AI into a lot of these situations, and, we don't know who's watching who. These are supposed to be self-monitoring systems, self-repairing systems, but they're biased. And there are lots of times there's unintended consequences. I mean, Facebook had that Alice and Bob system that they were bringing in, and then they figured out that Alice and Bob had figured out a way to secretly between them, communicate in a language of their own. And they shut it down right away because they didn't understand what was going on, and they were afraid, rightly so, because who knows whether you can trust something like that, because it's not under your control. It's so much faster than any human can figure out. So if you feed it garbage in, is it feeding you the same garbage out, or is it making new garbage? So it does reflect human biases. It does not necessarily understand, people's circumstances and cultures. It is not, it's all about the machine learning that goes into it. It's not magical. But at some point, there is some thought it will become self-aware, and will you be able to control it? I mean, this is the stuff of science fiction, but it's becoming reality pretty quickly. We've got a world of digital me, which are basically avatars. You can, in the old days, we used to call this dual processing, but you can have things like a digital twin, which would be, you could use it for your health passport, you can use it for voter information, you can use it for entertainment, you can do health testing. You could say, okay, I'm going to make everybody, I'm going to make this whole system, and it's going to pretend to be, I don't know, Susie. And then Susie doesn't have to actually come in, because it can run her DNA through everything and see how she reacts to all of these different kinds of drugs. And so there's some very interesting uses of it. But the principle is that humans are unpredictable. And if you assume that a digital twin is an exact copy, you're making a false assumption, because most people don't understand what the long-term life cycle and the what ifs are going on around with digital twins in the bigger picture. And, you need to model this, and you have to understand, where do you apply things like access privileges and data encryption? And, you have devices that are vulnerable. So how do you routinely run a security audit on this? Nobody knows yet. These are things that have to be developed. 5G is 6G and way beyond. I used to write telephone networks. There's incredible potential of connecting all kinds of devices around the world. But one of the issues, as we probably know from many of the technology folks that work in here, is backward compatibility. let's say, you're still running a 4G or a plain old telephone system.
2G,
well, plain old telephone system
3G.
doesn't work too much with anything. 2G, 3G. Thank you. I mean, we still don't understand how all these things interconnect.
Matter of fact, Verizon just stated that they're going to remain on 3G. They're going to keep 3G.
Well, I think, yes, they'd have to. So there's a lot of, by the way, there's a lot of hardware that still depends on dial-up. But you still need to understand that whole ecosystem. I mean, you have to understand, on a software network, where all these open endpoints are. Who can monitor this, right? So we've got to develop a whole lot of new trust models and understand the identification and be able to authenticate both people and devices. We need stronger data protection and end-to-end coming our way. We also want to start talking about this is one of my loves because of a background in biology and genetics, is looking at synthetic biology and organic uses. I mean, there's so much work going on starting to go on with DNA computing, DNA storage, using the actual structures of DNA to store information. When you look at our brains, we have so much more compute available in an average person's brains, so they don't all use it, than most computers out there in the world. Unfortunately, they don't stay forever. They are biodegradable. So you might want to use some organic biology and have some sensors for IoT that have no metals in them or don't really have anything other than something like a nanotube to start connecting these transistors together. And what are the security implications of that? Nobody really knows. But, it's developing now. People are working on this as a technology. We as security people also have to go in and say, and what about this? I'm not a person who believes in saying no to technology or having people going forward doing things. My take is always, let me find a way to work with you to make this secure. We have to find ways to work with people to make things secure. We've got people who are starting, we've been talking in science fiction about putting chips into people's brains forever. And, Elon Musk now has a company that's starting to work on this. And, there are other places in the world that are starting to work on this. And we don't really know what the implications are. What could possibly go wrong? Well, there's a lot of science fiction models we can look at that say what went wrong. But, we can all be overdrawn at the memory bank and not realize it. And, of course, it's the whole concept of wetware, organic computing using human nervous system models. There's some talk about actually using, growing brains in test tubes. Well, what does that mean? Does that brain have awareness? Do those cells get together? So there's a lot of ethical and security implications of all this stuff that people need to consider now. We can also talk a little bit about the Internet of Things. As you know, there's billions and billions and billions and billions of devices getting connected every day now. It's very easy to abuse because a lot of it is not secure. A lot of it's not smart devices. They're just sensors that are sending out information way past the edge of your, you don't know what's out there. I mean, it's open hunting season as far as I'm concerned on a lot of smart devices. I mean, smart TVs are, they may be smart, but they're not secure. There are lots of devices that can reach into your Wi-Fi network and then switch it off or do things and capture your credentials. So what are we doing really to look at that bigger picture? We're not. Healthcare is another area where we're doing a lot of work with, CRISPR manipulation. CRISPR allows you to go in there and change DNA at that cellular level and create new or snip out new things or, move genes around. So what does that mean to your security of something? If somebody comes along and says, okay, I'm going to take a snip of this moss and put it into your, I don't know, your human blood or something. Do you have green blood, or does it do something else to you? So there's a lot of things that are going on with surgical machines, that the Da Vinci machines and other kinds of surgical machines that are out there, or any kind of health support machines that you can reach in. You can go in there and right now and turn off people's inhaler over the ventilators over the internet. There's cardiac support machines over the internet. A lot of these hospitals, a lot of the places, healthcare facilities have very limited access to hardened security as far as their devices go. They might have a couple of machines locked down, but it really isn't. And, as biomechanicals are getting more and more sophisticated, as the prosthetics and implants are getting more sophisticated, a lot of them are talking, again, as IoT devices. And what will that mean when you can go, all of a sudden turn everybody's arm off or whatever, their diabetic pump or whatever it is. So, these things are all interwoven. You have to start looking at them as a bigger picture. So what could go wrong? Well, what happens if we just ignore the security on these things? Well, are we disrupting an entire society locally, globally? Who knows? Can you trust now if you turn off security? I don't think you can. There are a lot of ethical choices to be made, Look at AI. Will we allow AI to become the judge of us and not understand what it's doing? Will we be able to secure ourselves from people watching us from from a government or a corporate point of view, or from each other? There's a lot of bullying that goes on. Will we have privacy? Will we be able to make a return on investment? People forget that security can be essential to making a piece of equipment or a system or something else work very well and have an enormous return on investment, but it's hard to prove a lot of times because people don't take the time to understand their entire system. And I know it's not easy because a lot of times there's no management commitment, corners are cut, there's a lot of active threats out there. Budgets are being slashed.
Hard to prove the negative
events happen. Yeah. So, it's very hard to say that, what will be shut down, delayed, damaged, tampered with, destroyed. And if you don't give some thought about the abuse cases as well as the use cases, when you start designing systems and you start working with people who are designing systems or the engineers or whomever is doing this, because they're only seeing so often just that small slice. It's not that they don't want to. Until you point it out to them, many of them just don't see it.
Hey, Jean,
so,
can you please emphasize again abuse cases? So we have use cases. So in DevOps, which is the current methodology, right? We have use cases that are programmed to fit to.
Enormous, yeah.
I still
and people
lack seeing the abuse cases.
Right, because the people who are doing this have not been taught, or who don't understand how it fits into the big picture, or don't care. It's not. A lot of times people think it's not my job; it's somebody else's job. Why should I do this? It's just going to be overhead. It's going to cost me. Blah 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 blah. And so, unless you actually understand the negative what ifs that can happen, that potential promise for good of any system or device is destroyed pretty easily lots of times. So if you don't do those threat models, if you don't understand that you have to build this what you're protecting. And you're not doing an asset inventory. If you don't understand your company, you don't understand what's going on, well, of course, when something happens and you don't have a continuity model, for example, if you don't understand
context,
how to protect yourself too. Yeah. So, it's up to us to invent a more secure future. So, we have to participate in standard setting and not just standard setting, but do the work that the standards are meant to foresee. I mean, and when I look over the technology over the past 50 years, nobody envisioned some of the things that have happened today happening. But there were certain things when we started, for example, the Cloud Security Alliance, we didn't want to make the same mistakes with the cloud that we made with the internet without security. And, and still we had enormous problems. And still we have the DevOps and the DevSegOps and all these other, buzzwords that basically say, this is the flow from beginning to end, and where do we insert ourselves, right? My thing is you insert yourself in from the beginning. You participate from the beginning. So, we need to protect ourselves because otherwise it ends up, we are liable. So if you know who that is in the picture, it's an old picture of Marcus Ramos. I love this picture. So it's up to us to be proactive and use those compensating controls and plan for failure. And, don't just depend on compliance, because you're compliant doesn't mean you're secure, and vice versa. So this is a little thing where the term all that glitters is not gold. But it came out of Shakespeare, and many a man his life has sold for gold, and now we're paying consequences. So as Frank said before, we were going to talk a little bit about solar winds. I think you may have already gone over this, Frank. What it is, who, what, when, and why. And it's an advanced persistent threat out of the Russian Cozy Bear Group. And
there's a lot more to dive into that. I mean, solar winds reflects
absolutely
a massively complex attack, and I guess I hold the fact that this is an opportunity for us to actually dive into that and actually look deeper into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on around this. This is just a surface shot at it, right? But in some ways, it's the same old stuff, right? It's just more widespread. It's more insidious. But what have we learned? Well, complexity kills. Because if we don't understand our supply chain risk, and we don't look at our vendors, and we don't actually follow the standard type of security stuff we tell you in many, many frameworks, policy and standards and books and everything else in classes that we've all taken. And if we don't understand this, I don't know what we can be doing. We can't just keep talking about it. We need to do it. Actually don't allow people to post passwords to GitHub and keys to AWS and all the other things that people do. Sometimes there are mistakes made, but that's what monitoring is for. So you have to know yourself, but even better, know your enemy. And you can't always trust that everything's all right. You have to verify. You have to be vigilant. You have to have business continuity and recovery plans and test them and use them. What's the point if it's 10 pages of paper if nobody knows who to really talk to because that person's gone, who was supposed to do it, that you don't know what your assets are, you don't know what your software is, you don't know what's going on. So, it's hard sometimes. But if you don't monitor and you don't patch and you don't understand what you're doing, this is bullshit at this point. So, these are just some of the folks that got hit with it. Microsoft did a nice job of putting together some stuff, but just look at the list they have. So you infiltrate once, you drop all over the place, and then you start calling. This is just a small list. This is not the all of the companies that are on there. Microsoft did some wonderful work on the SolarGate stuff and talking about how to use, how to protect against SolarGate for Office 365 and what happens and how the supply chain got compromised and the C2 command and control access happened and how these keys were the back doors for the keys. And once you get your keys, they can do anything. So.
And actually, one thing later,
I would encourage everybody to read this. Yeah.
And actually, I'd like to hear from Frank later on use of saws and paws, secure access workstations.
Privileged access. I think that I've already committed that.
I know.
I'll be presenting on privileged access.
Yeah.
I learned it was called saws
Next
when
month,
I learned.
Right? Yeah.
Thanks for the pitch, by the way.
But VMware has also put out some stuff, but not as they didn't explain it as well. They put out a number of patches, but I encourage everybody to read this Microsoft protecting against SolarGate and understand how these things happen. And because these things are so complicated, you just end up with in the cloud searching for accounts of interest.
The tradecraft on this one was awesome.
Absolutely, right? And we all know that 99.99999% of systems are compromised. We just have to assume breach always. And I call these the ghosts in the machine because we know they're there. It's hard to see them sometimes because they keep a low profile. So that's how they get in, they spread, and we don't know because they're advanced persistent threats necessarily what's going on until they either somebody finds doing something like, maybe you should monitor what's coming in and out of your system that looks abnormal or out of a system that doesn't normally talk to the internet. Maybe. But, we all need to take a look at this and at least look at it and learn some lessons and do a root cause analysis. I mean, I know a lot of places no longer do root cause analysis because they're so overwhelmed. But step back, take some time, do brown bags, do whatever it takes to understand that if there's an anomaly, find out why. That's why they're called anomalies. They're not normal.
Oh, postmortem.
So the devils are in.
Postmortem.
What? Sorry?
Postmortem.
Yeah.
How did the thing die? Root cause analysis / postmortem. Yes.
Right. So, understand that, the devil is in the detail, and lots of times it's hard to look at some of this stuff. But if you don't understand what the issue is, how are you going to fix the problem, right? So, and once you do understand the issue, fix them. I just drives me crazy to understand that people are not, they talk to the wall sometimes, where they say, well, this has got to be fixed, but it never gets fixed. So it's like you either got to do it or get beyond the lip service, and because you have to make the business understand the return on investment, and that there are opportunity costs that are going to happen to the business if you don't pay attention, or to your government, or I just sort of generically put that under business.
You removed bolt-on security.
If you don't take the time to do it now, sorry?
You removed bolt-on security.
Yeah.
You had bolt-on security on that slide.
Yeah. Well, what can I tell you? Game on. So that's it. I'm sure that, you know, we can all peer into the future and try to understand from end to end that tech is great, but it's also easy to abuse. And that, you know, it's in our hands to not sit there and just twiddle our thumbs or feel so overwhelmed or get burnt out or succumb to the chaos. It is doable. It just takes a lot of work. And that's all I can say. Enjoy.